future. So I think how to make necessary industrial adjustments and also job replacements. I think this is a very important issue for developed countries. In the case of the US, traditionally they have a pretty fast, flexible labor market. So the US firms are typical, the image of US firms is that very easy to lay off people on the assumption that they can find another job very easily. So that is quite true at the macro level in the US. But if you look at the so-called Rust Belt, the manufacturing areas in the middle, so we found that that kind of job replacement is sometimes not quite smooth, and unemployment stays in some specific regions. So we really have to think of how to make smooth labor adjustments according to industrial adjustments. So I think that should be a sort of a very important policy target for the Trump administration, and unfortunately he's not interested in that either. In case of Japan, actually after 2002, we are not losing manufacturing employment in so manufacturing firms with more than 50 employees. Small firms are getting out of the market, yes, but so manufacturing firms with more than 50 employees are not really losing employment. What we are doing is a sort of job replacement within a firm a lot. So they are doing different activities, the sections are changing. Actually, we are having very active intra-firm job replacements. So I think this is one of the secrets how to avoid quick deindustrialization. But certainly that kind of adjustment may delay a larger scale of industrial adjustment. We are having a relatively slow adjustment in terms of industries. So we really have to think of those kind of industrial adjustment seriously. In case of ASEAN and East Asia, actually we observe a very quick poverty alleviation. This is quite different from other parts of the world. In other parts of the world, sometimes economic growth rates are high, but poverty alleviation is very slow. But in that sense, our region is very successful. The secret is that we are using globalization. We are having production networks or second unbundling, and then many ASEAN countries and also China are having manufacturing sector-based economic growth. And then manufacturing generates a lot of jobs for poorer people. So people can move from rural to urban or so informal to formal sector. So I think that kills poverty very quickly. So in this region, so globalization is, at least from the sense of bottoming up, income distribution is getting even better. Then of course, we have some super rich people problem in ASEAN and China too. Rich people are rich forever. Sometimes we do not have progressive income tax system, or there's no bequest tax, so rich people are rich forever. Eventually, Asian countries also have to think of that seriously, but at least from the sense of bottoming up, we are very successful. So I think very important thing is that we are really in the world of 21st century, not having a trade in final goods, exports and imports, but we are having international division of labor in terms of production processes or tasks. That kind of movement doesn't stop. May I see my slide, please? I just want to show one slide. PowerPoint, please. Yeah. This is just one example. This is a so-called geographical simulation model results. The model is developed by my organization area and also IDE JETRO. The exercise is that if we have better infrastructure in ASEAN and surrounding Asia, plus we have removal of non-tariff barriers, then what would happen? The red portion is a sort of a positive effects coming in. Actually, this is the cumulative gains between 2020 to 2030. divided by 2010 GDP. So the number doesn't really matter, but I'd like you to see the geographical pattern. I can see that most of the projects are in ASEAN in this simulation, but you can see a lot of red portion in Japan and also Korea and also China too. So I think we are really connected. So not just a sort of exports and imports of final goods, but many parts and components are moving, and also economic activities are extended across national border. So that's why some better connectivity in ASEAN has a lot of positive impacts in China and also India too. So particularly in the case of China and India, the removal of non-tariff barriers in this simulation has a pretty large effect. So I think this is a secret of ASEAN and East Asia. We are really connected, and also this kind of connection is getting tighter and tighter. Some are worrying about a sort of slowdown of trade in the past 3-4 years. But I think this is a sort of temporary move. That technology for getting a sort of better connection, this is going more and more advanced. So we can generate various kinds of international division of labor in the future in this region. So in that sense, infrastructure development is certainly important, and also deeper economic integration is very important too. So in the world, we have a sort of headwind coming for a sort of anti-globalism, but I think this region is getting a lot of benefits from globalization, particularly in the mechanism of global value chains. We really have to raise our voice that freer trade, freer investment is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very various views, and keeping up the time so that I can have enough time to have a discussion. So now let's turn to the panel discussion. And the first point I would like to make is your evaluation on the Trump effect on your economy, homeland or home area. So, and the second one is probably on the impact of the tendency towards bilateralism by the US Trump administrations. So America First strategy may lead to some dispute between the US and other countries. The US insists on the fairness on trade. Fairness is a keyword. So it is very unpredictable because fairness is very hard to assess objectively. So this movement can change the environment of global trade. In some other areas, in advanced economy, we may observe some threat of protectionism. So some are afraid of a kind of trade war, for example, anti-dumping tariffs on certain goods. And the counteraction, retaliation on one another, so by the object, which leads to a vicious cycle of the protectionism or declining the trade volumes. So I would like to ask for panelists, and the first one is, so what specific impact will the US protectionist policy have on Asia, especially on your homeland? And secondly, because of this bilateral approach taken by Trump administration, what kind of effect are you expecting on your coverage? So then I would like to ask you first, Dr. Lee. So, and the US-China trade relationship is, of course, the hot topic. And as we know that China and the US have agreed on the 100 days plan to reduce the deficit. But there's a question whether it's enough or not, and what is the future of the bilateral trade relationship between China and the US. So I would like to ask you a remark. Thank you.
Thank you. The chairman ask me answer the question first. Maybe the China have a huge, great trade imbalance with the United States. So the United States protection policy has to have a huge negative impact on China's economy. However, China's economy has been integrated with the global value chain at the GVC. Then the negative effects will inevitably extend to the other countries of GVC, such as, for example, Japan, Korea, the Chinese Taiwan, and the ASEAN countries. Not long ago, Chinese institution published a firm list harmed by American protection policy. Most of the firms are TNC from the other countries, but they invest in China. Of course, it have a negative spillover effects on other Chinese firms and the firms in other countries. 2 months ago, President Xi Jinping and President Trump meet and reached a 100-day plan. Maybe that's just a beginning. There are many uncertainties for its prospect. Above all, China and Asian countries share common interests in addressing protest. That's my conclusion.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask Mr. Dr. Kimura, and especially on the difference between the two bilateral relationship. So one is U.S.-China and the U.S.-Japan, secondly. So we have now Japan-U.S. bilateral framework, so talking round. But it's not so obvious what kind of results will be taking place. So this is I would expect some kind of competition between the two situations, two bilateral relationships. So please comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think even Mr. Trump gradually understands that he cannot do everything that he said in Twitter. So the room for degree of freedom is something limited even by the president. But in case of security issues and trade issues, he has relatively large degree of freedom. So we are not quite sure what he would do. We read some newspaper articles on his visits to Germany and talk with the German leader, and he's criticizing the number of German cars sold in the US, and I think that kind of statements are sort of crazy. But still, a sort of a trade team is in the process of forming in the US. Mr. Lighthizer was appointed as a sort of head of USTR. He's a really hardcore trade lawyer. So I think he would use various kinds of relatively traditional measures to talk about international trade compared with Mr. Trump. That would be expected, but we are not quite sure what would be a sort of content yet. So one thing is that we really have to closely watch on NAFTA negotiation or negotiation with Mexico. I think that is going to be the most important thing. And the line of negotiation is a sort of extension of NAFTA and heading for a sort of freer trade or investment, something closer to TPP, or some protectionism elements are coming in or there or not. I think that is one thing that we really have to watch carefully. And meanwhile, I think in Asia, I think we have a lot of room for working together, together with ASEAN and also China too. I think we are having a sort of common interest in protecting freer trade, freer investment. I think the initiatives in Asia are going to be very important. That would make a sort of a good influence to the US too. So eventually, US may come to, US may ask Japan to negotiate bilateral FTA. I think in that case, Japan should take it, I think. But in negotiation, we really have to be what we should do and what we should not do. I think the situation is quite different from what we used to have, say, around 1990, in structural adjustment initiative. We had a lot of weak points at that time, but now in Japan, the only weak point is agriculture, basically. So we have to do something on agriculture, but other elements, I think we have relatively small problems. So I think we really have to think of what we should do and what we should not do. And China, certainly, China will possibly have a small and also large trade conflicts, trade disputes with the US than even more than Japan. But I think, again, China should make a sort of judgment on what China should do, what China should not do. I think we really have to protect the freer trade, freer investment regime in this region.
Thank you very much. Then I'd like to ask a remark, Dr. Surin.
Thank you very much. I think the rhetoric during the campaign to make America first strong again and to bring investment back to America, create jobs in America, is going to be very, very difficult to achieve. I think walking away from multilateralism and adopting bilateralism, meaning doing away with collective bargaining, but twisting arms because just me and you across the table is going to make everybody feel very, very insecure and uncertain. Already, I think all of us in Southeast Asia, some of us are being called cheaters because the balance of payment and balance of trade in our favor. America is such a big market, and it has been open for a long, long time. For some of us, it's the most important market, but for ASEAN as a whole, it's third or fourth largest market. First is still China, second is the EU, and then the US and Japan and the US. So I think the paradigm is shifting, and it forces all of us to adjust what to do with this